Welcome to the Design for Living Big Book study. Bill and I will be sharing our own experience of how the Big Book has helped us in the removal of our drug of choice, or actually our substance of no choice, as discussed previously. But more importantly, how the directions contained within the Big Book have helped change all aspects of our lives. We will share our pain and successes as it relates to our own journey and the hundreds of men and women we have had the pleasure of helping through sponsorship or otherwise. Bill, myself, or the UDRcast are not affiliated with any 12-step program. We neither endorse nor discredit any method of recovery. We are supportive of all paths to recovery. We are just passionate about what works for us. The opinions shared in this study are solely that of the person that is sharing them. And that is a go. We're good to go, Billy.
Sweet.
Where did we end off? 77?
Robin?
78?
78.
Good old Robin, I tell you, man. Every time she knows. All right, under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply, we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We're there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. So to give this some preface, in case you weren't here last week, we are at the point where we don't shy away from making direct amends, okay? We go to it. We announce our convictions with tact and common sense. The question of the man who we hate will come up. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him, and I'm just going back a paragraph so we can catch up. Sorry. We may have acquired a better attitude toward him. We are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. Does everyone understand that saying? Take the bit in our teeth. Is like riding a horse, okay? And there's a metal bit that is on the reins of a horse, right? To help guide them. And the horse takes that into their teeth, and then they get comfortable with you leading them on where they need to go. So we take the bit in our teeth and we go to it. We just go to making the amends directly, right? It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. Now, preferably we don't go, I fucking hated you, man. Oops, I'm already the one that broke the rule.
Jesus.
You just took the Lord's name in vain, so that's worse. I hate you, man, but I'm here to apologize. Let's try and be tactful, right? That's this whole chapter, or this whole section of the book is about using tact and common sense. And it'll actually even say that in the literature shortly, if it hasn't already. So we go to the guy we don't like, confessing our former ill feeling. I used to really despise you, and I regret it. Because this is what I did, So here we are now. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. So I told a story. Do you all recall the story I told about my old boss last week? Anyone remember that? About how he showed up outside of my house across the street and how I tried to wait and had a couple smokes and waiting him out. I did not want to make that amends because I can't stand the guy, right? Finally, I looked up in the sky and I said, okay, God, obviously you need me to do this right now, so I will. And I went to him and I had a really good conversation. Not once did I say, you know what, you were a party animal, you were never around, you were never there for me. I started using this because you were using it with clients and you told me I should be doing it too. I never said any of those things to this guy. I owned my own shit. I was very hard to deal with. I would come in late and thought I could get away with it. I would treat our peers, poorly because I was the big producer of the company, and I thought I could get away with it. And I never once took any consideration of anyone's feelings, and I know that laid a lot of pressure on you, is what I said to him. And I owe you an apology. I'd like you to know that I'm trying to change. And I allowed him to talk. And he told me some things about how difficult it was dealing with me and managing me, and eventually how difficult it was for him to fire me. He and I will never be close friends, but believe it or not, like 9 years later, I just called him a couple weeks ago for some advice. It's the weirdest thing, man. It's the weirdest thing. But I thought he was someone that would understand the stress I was under, and he might be able to offer me some good direction. But that came many years later, after many conversations and a lot of water under the bridge, right? But that initial amends was important. It was very important. At the time, I couldn't stand him. Do you know why? Because I didn't understand him. I hadn't forgiven myself. I hadn't forgiven him. But once I made amends, I had, and things started getting better. So, I did not criticize him. Simply, we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. So I didn't tell him I'm all in, believing in God, I'm spiritual now, and I want to set right the path. I'm just like, look, man, I'm sober now, and I got to do this. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. That's about it. I don't think I even said that because I'm not really a big believer in, that's selfish to tell him that, to be honest with you. But we were there to sweep off our side of the street, which is what I did. I owned my own stuff, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. Their faults, his faults, are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. I will eventually feel good about making that amends if I stay calm. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. I always tell my sponsees this when we go over steps 9. Often the people that you're making amends to are just going to say, you know what, it looks like you're doing some good stuff. You're getting your life together. Just keep doing what you're doing, right? And that's true. A lot of people say that. Probably not the most growth for me when they do, but a lot of people are just kind that way. They're kinder than me. Because remember, just not too long ago, I resented all of these people, right? All right. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter. However, if someone does throw us out of his office, we have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. So with my ex-boss, that happened. He owned some of his own faults. He recognized that he wasn't the greatest leader and mentor for me. He also applauded what I was doing, and for years down the line when I would run into him at golf tournaments and things like that, marketing events, he would always make a point of coming and having a conversation with me and telling me how proud he was that I had changed my life. And that meant a great deal to me, and I'm not sure why, but it did. It meant that he was a decent guy. I judged him very poorly. Maybe he was just sick at the time too. You know what I mean? But these things can happen through this whole process. People can heal. Step 9 is about healing or allowing others to heal. And the fallout for us is we heal as well. It's really a beautiful gift. I've had people throw me out of their office too. I owed money. I had to go to a flooring guy and say, look, I didn't pay you. I did tell that guy I was getting sober, and he he said, I really don't care. I just want my money. And you know what? Fair enough. I said, okay, well, I brought some for you, and I'll make payments until I've got you paid off. And that's exactly what I did. And at the end of it, he said, thank you very much for standing up to your word. And that's it. I've never talked to him or done business with the guy again. Never seen him again. He didn't care to ever see me again. He thought I was a dirtbag, right? But he was just happy he got his money. And you know what? I'm happy he got it too. Here we go. Most alcoholics owe money. We do not dodge our creditors. Telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. Financial debt is a tough one. I still had a house, okay? I still had a holiday trailer. I still had a Harley Davidson when I finally sobered up because, my wife kind of prevented me from getting rid of all that, and it didn't quite get that far. She kicked me out before that happened. So when I sobered up, we remortgaged our house, which was almost paid for completely, and I completely started over with a whole brand new 25-year mortgage. I sold our holiday trailer. I sold my Harley, which was really probably the most difficult out of that one for me. It was quite easy for my wife. But this was all really hard stuff on her. She was doing Facebook Marketplace things and selling stuff. And, we had a lot of stuff, and she was having to sell them and borrow money off of her father because for the first few years, as we've talked about, I didn't make much money. I was struggling just to live, but I was trying to grow spiritually. But I did. I kept paying these things. Now, tact and common sense we talk about comes in. Not everybody here, most people, quite honestly, don't have the house and the trailer and the Harley to sell to get the original, the big ones off your back, right? A lot of people come in here with nothing. And the point is we just have to try and do our best. Growth spiritually has got to come first, and we have to start growing. And we can't be of any use to anyone, and they're certainly never going to get their money back if I don't grow, if I don't take this seriously and get better. And that sometimes takes time. But what this book is telling me is don't dodge them anymore. Have a clear conversation with the people you owe money to. Like, when the bike gang called me and said, we've bought your debt and you're going to pay. And I went, well, you can't bleed money from a stone, right? I mean, I don't have anything, but I'll set up a payment plan with you. Even the most ruthless of creditors tend to understand that they're going to have to take what they can get. The money mart people. Has anyone had to deal with a money mart creditor? Those freaking people are the most ruthless I've ever experienced. They call you 60,000 times a day, and then they start calling any number they can that is related to you, like your wife and your mom and your brother. They'll call those people. They're crazy. If you have a chat with them, they tend to calm down. If you start giving them a little bit of money, they start to settle down because they realize, they're either going to get nothing or they can settle for a little bit at a time. They can. You know what? That's probably a good thing, right? I mean, Robin said they can garnish your wages now. I know personally, she said. So, but yeah, that's good. I mean, that's okay, right? when we first sobered up, not many of us have jobs. So what are you going to garnish, right? I mean, what are you going to garnish? See, there's nothing to take, right? But the problem for us alcoholics is that when we have shit hanging over our heads, it causes that stress. It starts to build and build and build. And that puts us at risk of drinking again. And if we drink again, what happens? Or what could happen? We could die. That's right. So this is pretty serious stuff. Do you hear the voices, the lyrics that are coming across from the church? I once was lost and now I'm found. That's pretty cool, man. Wow, that gives me shivers. Okay, Bill, I'm going to let you take over there. I talked a lot about that.
And you ended here?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really have much to add, but just a heads up, Gord, we do have quite a bit of material to kind of cover.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Yeah, Gord.
It's all my fault, people, that we've been here 6 months.
So the only thing I have really is at the top of 78, his faults are not discussed. So what I guess I'd like to kind of start off with is we talk about the directions in the big book. Step 9 is also clear-cut directions. It's pretty clear what the directions are if you look at it. And like if you take what the directions are seriously and like as you are reading for your own life and as you are sponsoring, like for the sponsoring aspect, really tune into what the directions are, right? And so at the top of 78, his faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm and frank and open, we'll be gratified with the result. And that's the data that you give your sponsee. You don't discuss his faults. This is only about you. And normally me as a sponsor, when I'm getting somebody, depending on who it is and how far they're advanced they are in understanding self, like not everyone kind of gets it the same. So there's some people I'm like, okay, before we do the amends, you're going to write letters. You're going to write 8 letters. And I want to see what the letters look like so that I can identify whether you're blaming the alcohol or kind of getting out of it, or you can find out a lot if you get them to write letters, right? And maybe not like 20 or 30, but you can get an idea of how they're going to do this with 5 or 10 letters, right? And you can see it, right? And it's like, oh shit, you're blaming the alcohol. You're not taking responsibility. This is about taking responsibility for the harms that we've done. So writing letters is a good way to kind of check that with your sponsees. And even for yourself, right? Even for yourself, you can write a letter and then reread it and go, holy shit, am I ever like in self there? So that's just a little bit of a tidbit of information. A lot of times when I do the step 9, I talk about it from the sponsoring perspective and sometimes from my own perspective. Because I will tell you, the amount of calls I've gotten for like people that are doing amends or other pillars that call me and say, hey, this is the situation, my sponsee's got an amend, and I don't know what to do. I probably have fielded more calls for amends than almost maybe anything else. And for me, the hardest advice to give is for the amends, because everything's a little different with every person, right? All the relationships are different, the defects are different, situations are all different. So it takes a lot of sometimes me bouncing certain things off my pillars to come back with some good data for the person. And like, you know, sometimes we don't even know how it's going to go, so you're just kind of shooting in the dark. Again, back to like Gord was talking about, most alcoholics owe money. The funny thing about money is when we, like sometimes I got to tell the sponsees like 2 or 3 times to put the financial amends on their list. Most people will do a list and just miraculously, they never put financial harms on there, right? Like watch as you're sponsoring people and you say, I need your step 8 list of the harms that you've done to institutions, people, organizations, whatever it is. And they'll give you their list. And almost never does it have the financial amends on there because they don't really want to do it and they don't think about it. The thing about owing money is when you have your money, but you owe money, you think it's your money that you're giving away. It's not your money that you're giving away. It's their money that you're giving them back, right? And like thinking about it like that. And some people, like I've done step 8s and harms lists where the guy's owed $100,000 or $200,000, right? Many with 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80,000. Like lots of people owe that amount of money, right? 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever it is. And to see that like mountain of amends, like financial amends, and you're like 35 or 40 or 50, and you're like, how am I ever going to pay that back? Well, it doesn't really matter how. It's a matter of like, put it on there, and then you take the bit in your teeth and you start chipping away at it. And I've seen people spend 10 years making amends. And I'm not saying this, like, don't get scared of it. Because the growth that they've gone through and gotten out of 10 years of amends, making their payments back to whatever it was, it freed them in ways that like your average person who never made those amends that owed that money to, they'll never grow spiritually like the person who finally finished their amends. It's like spiritual awakening, like high level shit. So don't be afraid of the financial amends and, go at it with the guidance of your sponsor again. When I came into recovery, I had $300,000 owing. And part of how I cleaned up my past is I went and declared bankruptcy. So one of the hardest things I ever did was declare bankruptcy because my pride, and I used to own this business, and I used to make this money, I used to, and it was like, I didn't want that to be me. Right? Because when I was making money and people would go bankrupt, I thought less than for them. But then I became that. And like all through the study, I've given you guys examples of the things that I never wanted to be or do, whatever. I always had to end up being them or doing them in recovery. So that's where the humility came, right? And so I had to put, I was thinking I wanted to do a consumer proposal instead, which isn't as bad as bankruptcy, right? So I felt a little better. My ego felt better. But then when I went through it with the trustee, he just said, you're just better off to fucking go bankrupt, man. And I'm like, but 7 years, no credit. And at the time, but here I am. I just burnt down my whole life. I got not a pot to piss in, and I'm worried about my fucking credit, right? Of course. And so I did it, man. And, best decision I ever made. I got rid of basically $250,000, $300,000 in debt. And, all I had to pay was $900 every, it was $200 every 2 weeks or something like that for 9 months. I was blown away that I could wipe off $250,000, $300,000 with $200 payments. I think every week or 2 weeks, I can't remember. But then 9 months it was done. And I was like, I don't owe any more money. They're like, nope, scot-free. They gave me a certificate, said you don't owe anyone any money. If somebody comes after you, you give them this thing, and you tell them to call us. And somebody did come after me, and I gave them that thing. And then I was free. And then I learned how to manage money through not having credit cards or anything, right? I learned how to get like a $25 a month phone. I learned how to get like really cheap things. I learned how to like become a minimalist because I wasn't able to do anything. And it was a really good lesson. And then finally, this was a few years ago now, my little telephone that I'd been paying for all these years, it allowed me to get like a $3,000 credit card. And then since then, I've been really diligent, right? So I learned a lot of lessons. But I guess my point is you got to go through the pain of doing whatever it is. And thank God I went the bankruptcy way, because paying that amount of money back would have been really, really hard. But put me in that position today, knowing what I know and seeing what I've seen, I would do it. I would pay the money back, little by little. So
So, Bill,
Yeah.
we do have a lot of material to get through.
Thanks, Gord.
Boom!
Okay, so just to finalize, we must lose our fear of creditors, no matter how far we have to go. And my sponsor did tell me when I owed some other people money that weren't on that financial part of it that I remembered later. He's like, just call them. And I did that. And I said, but I don't have the money. He's like, just let them know that you haven't forgot about them. And it worked out. Okay, I'm going to keep reading from perhaps. Perhaps we have committed a criminal offense. So, Gord, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give her.
Yeah.
And so make your notes or whatever and then come back. So perhaps we have committed a criminal offense. Anyone? No. Of course, Hector, before I even get it finished. He's like, nope. Fuck.
That's good.
Criminal offense which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we are sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only in petty offenses such as padding an expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we are divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up with the alimony to number one. She is indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. Although these reparations may take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves. So again, here's the second reminder in the step 9. He gave us the first reminder, I think on the first or second page, and here's the other one. Reminding ourselves that we decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. And why does he remind us twice in the step 9? Because we talked about it last week. Step 8's the pretty big relapse step. Because things get pretty good for most people. And then they don't really want to do the rest of this stuff. So the book is emphasizing, remember, you agreed to this at the beginning. You would do whatever it took, right? So we ask that we be given strength and direction. There's some directions. To do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. So in the how it works, all through the study, we talked about rigorous honesty. Just be rigorously honest, no matter what the consequences are. And again, back to step 7, page 72, top of the page. With a proper display of honesty and morality, you stand a better chance of getting what you really want. So today I went into one of my contracts and there was a whole bunch of things that I needed to talk to her about. And I had a debrief with the supervisor yesterday. And I said, look, I really need to talk to you. And this is what I'm going to take to your boss tomorrow. And I'm just going to be totally transparent and honest about everything. And this is how it has to be. And that's how I fucking pretty much roll now. I'm just transparent about these things. And even though I'm scared about telling the truth because of the repercussions of what might happen, that's okay. I've learned that the benefits come through just being honest and doing it properly. Whatever the consequences may be. We may lose our position or reputation or face jail. So that's pretty high risk. Fucking up your position in your community, in your standing, at work. Your reputation might be very tarnished or face jail. But we are willing. Like highlight and underline and circle that shit for your own lives and for the emphasis for the people you work with. Because most people are so scared of these things and outing themselves. But the spiritual growth that comes through this, even though you might feel the pain, the humiliation and the pain, but eventually down the fucking road is where you will find the freedom. So the ego's worried about now. You got to sacrifice that now for like the version of you like down the road. Because it's not just you here today. There's you tomorrow and then the next day and the next day. And then there's you in 5 years. And like, who do you want to be in like 5 years? Well, it all is dictated from who you are now and what you're doing now. You want to hide and like lie and not be honest? Well, that isn't really going to go anywhere unless you like tackle it like now, right? But of course, you have good God-centered pillars. Any good God-centered pillar is going to tell you to be honest and tell the truth anyway. But if you go to Buddy in step 4 and get your advice from Buddy in step 4 in treatment, fuck, don't do that. Lots of guys will do that. But we are willing. We have to be, period. We must not shrink in anything. Look at how he wrote that. We have to be. One sentence. It's a statement, period. We must not shrink in anything, period. That's how Bill W. writes. Like, that's emphasis, right? Usually, however, people are involved. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we are not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save his own skin from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried because of resentment and drinking. He had not paid his alimony to his first wife. She was furious. She went to the court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life and had secured a position and was getting his head above water. It would have been impressive heroics if he had walked up to the judge and said, "Here I am." We thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary. But if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. So we suggested he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking for forgiveness. He did, and also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try to do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Of course, she did not, and the whole situation has long been adjusted. So I'm just going to tell a quick story on that, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gord. So I worked with a guy. I was only 18 months sober. This was in Regina. Some of the Regina people probably don't know. His name was Mike G. He's in Ontario now. Some of the people that know me know Mike G. He's now, a year and a half behind me, and I got 10 years, so he's like 8.5 years. I'm still in touch with him. He just celebrated a birthday recently. So anyway, I was sponsoring this guy. He was the town drunk. He had been to 80 homeless shelters across Canada. He was hopeless, and no one thought he was going to get sober. I went there. He heard the message that I took from the book. He asked me to sponsor him. He wasn't ready. 2 weeks later, he said he was ready, and then he waited for me. I took him through the steps. He's never drank again. He got sober, and people started noticing this guy was sober based on me being a big book thumper, because at first they didn't want nothing to do with me. And then after I started helping some people that would never be sober, they got sober after I sponsored them. And it wasn't me, it was because of this stuff. And then people started talking to me and like acknowledging me. So anyway, Mike, I sponsored him. And he was so willing. We'd be doing step work, and he'd be falling asleep because he would come after work at like 8 at night after working 12, 13 hours, and he would show up, and he was so willing, and he would fall asleep. And he'd get upset and worried that I was going to fire him because he was falling asleep. And I saw the willingness in him. I wasn't going to fire him at all because he was super willing. He was just tired and exhausted. But he wanted this stuff. So I was with him, and I did it with him. Anyway, we got all the way to step 9, and this guy had done some things with an organization where he took money, and said that he had this mental illness and he didn't really have it, and he faked like he had it for fucking 10 years. And he took like $900 a month for 10 years. And that was a lot of money, man. And by the time we got to this spot, he knew that was on his harms list. And he said, "What are we going to do about me doing that?" He says, "I'm willing to go to jail if I have to." Like, he was seriously willing to go to jail for what he had done because he couldn't pay the money back. And I said, bro, to me, that just warmed my heart that this guy was that willing to do everything I was just been talking about. He was willing to go to any length and go to jail. I said, I think I know what I want to tell you, but I'm going to go back to Calgary on my time off. I'm going to talk to some pillars, and I'm going to come back, and then we'll rediscuss it. So right here where it said we thought he ought to be willing to do that, if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. So we suggested blah, blah, blah. Anyway, what I suggested and what I thought, and the people that were my pillars, they gave me the same advice, that he had changed. And he had started making amends to his ex-wife, sending her money. His daughter, who he had abandoned, he reconnected. He was doing all the things that the program promises, and he was doing it at the level that he could do it, the best that he could. And he was sponsoring, not sponsoring quite yet, but he was helping a lot of people, doing service at the Salvation Army because that's where he was living. And anyway, I didn't make him do that. I said, but when you do get on your feet, you donate money to the mental health organization, like maybe it's a year or 2 or 5 years down the road, but you just worry about building relationships with your ex-wife and your kids and blah, blah, blah. And then later you can, action ought to be deferred. You've heard that for amends. So we deferred the action till later when he could do it. But because he was helping his wife and his kids, that was the main thing, and he was helping other people. And so that's why I'm saying, like, don't think you know what the amends are going to look like. Leave it to your sponsor, and if he's good and he's God-centered, he's going to give you, like, the best advice for your life. But some people wouldn't even, like, do the amends because of that fear just in that situation, right? And he would not go that far, and he would probably drink after. That's why we have to keep an open mind, because we don't really know how this is going to go. And most amends never go how you think they're going to go. They go so much different. So, and today he speaks all over Ontario for one of the 12-step fellowships. He started a meeting in a small town. He's like, just does everything, man. He does everything to serve Creator and his kids. And he's a great member. Just had a kid, a 2-year-old kid. His 16-year-old daughter is in the program. She's now 17 or 18. She's sober. Like, his ripple effect and fingerprints are on many, many people in this world. And so he's really changed and done some good things. That's it. Who was that? It's Hector.
You're happy that's
the
it?
first time you looked at me for 10 minutes straight. You must have some serious amends going on back there.
All right, I got nothing to add. That's enough. You can clap for that too, Hector, if you want. Bill, we start here at This Springs, right? Page 80, This Springs? Yeah, This Springs on page 80, right?
Yeah, top of the page.
Thank you.
Before
taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, ask God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. So all the things Bill just talked about. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as a basis for discrediting the man. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. He felt that he had done wrong he could not possibly make right. If he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him now? How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? After consulting with his wife and partner, the two people that would be mostly affected by this, he came to the conclusion that it was still better to take those risks than to stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again, and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. He told everyone what he had done. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. This all happened years ago. That is honesty and spiritual reward. We've talked about this before, and that's what I have written in my book, because that, to me, is very, very important. That same boss that I talked to you guys about, and a couple others, to be honest with you, I had to also admit that I had misappropriated my expense accounts. I'd spent a lot of money, on stuff that wasn't business, that wasn't marketing. I took friends to hockey games and to the bars and to dinner, and I had to own up to that. And I did that. And oddly enough, he didn't want any of the money back, which was crazy. But what I can tell you is that the relief from doing that changed me inside. The honesty that was filled, I was so filled with fear about sharing that level of honesty. And when it was over, the fear was replaced with a gratitude and a grace of God that I can't explain. It was like a second chance at life, and I realized it in that moment. And that's the level of spiritual reward that comes from being that honest. It's hard. It's hard to face things. It's hard to face people and get that bloody honest. And that is why a lot of people fail at step 9. That's why a lot of people go back to using, because it's so difficult to face our truths. But keep in mind that it's very important to continue reminding people, we ask others. We talk to our spiritual advisors. It keeps saying that. We discuss this with our friends and people that will be affected. We have to talk about these things with people, because what I think I know isn't always what I know. Perhaps if it would have been differently, my wife and kids would have been the only ones really affected by that, and they were for me getting honest. So it worked out that I could do that. But sometimes there's people that we shouldn't affect just to get that spiritual reward, because that would be selfish. See what I'm saying? It's a fine line. And that's why I talk to people. I talk to people that I trust. I talk to people that are God-centered, 12-step people, and the answer comes, The chances are that we have domestic troubles. Perhaps we're mixed up with women or men in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. So in other words, maybe we're cheating. We doubt if, in this respect, alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people, but drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife or a husband get worn out, resentful and uncommunicative. How could they be anything else? The alcoholic begins to feel lonely and sorry for themselves. They commence to look around in the nightclubs or their equivalent for something besides liquor. Perhaps they're having a secret and exciting affair with the person who understands. And in fairness, we must say that he or she may understand. But what are we going to do about a thing like that? A man or woman so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if they're married to a loyal and courageous person who've literally gone through hell for them. Whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our faults. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to them that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we may wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom they can vent their jealousy. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. Keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk a face-to-face combat. So in other words, maybe we start correcting our mistakes by being a better human and being a better husband or wife, by being a better father or mother, by being a better person in that relationship, showing up with support and love in the flank, taking at a different angle instead of, being outright and saying, hey, I hurt you. But they're also saying, we're not going to tell you which way to go. That is up for us to have conversations with our people and with God. If we have no such complication, there's plenty we should do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say that the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. Yeah, I'm glad to see some people go, right? Because that's absolutely not the case. Certainly he must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't, but he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents or husband or children for whom the years he has been so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patient mothers and wives or husbands, fathers have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today and would perhaps be dead. I can tell you right now that I would probably be dead if it wasn't for my wife. Now, I fortunately did not step out on her when I was using, but I harmed her. I made her feel less than. I made her terrified of what was to come. I made her financially insecure. And I basically destroyed her for several years. I kept her in a constant state of insecurity and fear. And I owe her a great deal for that. And today, she knows that I spend every day trying to make her happy. She knows that I have changed. I can honestly tell you now, we have a relationship that we have never had before. We are best of friends, and there's nobody that would ever be able to come between us. But I'll tell you something, that was not an easy path. At 9 months sober, I think she asked me to go get a piss test, and I was mortified. Don't you know I'm actually finally staying sober, even though I lied to you so many times before? But I didn't get mad at her that time. I just said, okay, I'll go get it. And I did. And she told me that she knew the minute I agreed to go get it and then got it that there was no problem, but my behaviors hadn't changed. It was starting to scare her again. Years she would get angry with me. Years. She started seeing a therapist because of her anger towards me. Good for her. She needed to heal too. She needed a program. She needed to be able to talk things out and learn things. And I'll tell you something, we've both done a tremendous amount of work. And it's brought us to a place of unbelievable love and partnership. But it's been a very difficult road that we're both very happy we took, The alcoholic's like a tornado, roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead, affections have been uprooted, selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. And this is what I did. I was always a mess. And she was trying to manage my kids who were teenagers at the time, and she was trying to help her mother who lived with us and essentially near the end had cancer and was going to treatments and things like that. And she's trying to manage that and keep me off over here and keep them all protected from that. What a nightmare that must have been for her. We feel man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough, because it isn't. Sobriety is not enough to correct that stuff. They are like the farmer who come up out of the cyclone cellar to find their home ruined. And to his wife he remarks, "I don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" So in other words, the storm's over, I'm sober, everything should be fine. But it's not. There's years of reconstruction ahead. I don't want to scare anybody, but if you want to do this thing right, it's going to take time. I'll stop there.
Okay, I'm just going to close up something on page 80, and then I'm going to wait after break, and then I'll kind of continue on through the relationship and sex conduct portion of this. But just kind of going back to like what we were talking about a little bit ago on 80, where it talks about brings this mind to a story about one of our friends drinking, accepted a sum of money, and he didn't really want to make good on it, right? And he wanted to lie about it. And, after consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion it was better to take those risks and then stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. So that's kind of like what we're talking about, right? No matter what it is, like being honest, being rigorously honest, taking the courage of creator and then going at something, being honest, and like whatever the consequences might be, we got to be willing to face those consequences. And that's what this guy did, right? And what happened to this guy, anyway, he saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands or he would soon start drinking again. And whether or not he started drinking, which is a very high risk, by the way, because dishonesty bleeds into the rest of your life. If you're dishonest in an area and you don't cap that and start taking care of it, it's just like a drop of dye in water. It just starts kind of taking over the water with that color, and you can't really see it, right? It's very subtle. That's what dishonesty does. That's why it's the first step, and the steps is the first principle, because you have to build on a solid set of the first step. If you're not honest, then that step's crooked, and then everything else is crooked, and everything will fall down. So he attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval. So he admitted whatever it was, right? And he got widespread approval, and people accepted that. It doesn't say that a lot of people probably didn't accept it. And he probably got ridiculed, and he probably got talked about, and his reputation with a lot of people was probably slandered. And even with the approval that he did get, he probably lowered the trust from a lot of those people who were like, yeah, that's good, I'm glad you did that. But now their trust that they might have had in him was diminished. So he had to probably rebuild his trust by the character and living this new way with that honesty at the forefront. And it probably took him, this all happened years ago, right? But now he's one of the most trusted citizens of his town. And that's kind of the results of living this way of life, but in the long game. Because you wouldn't have been able to see that in that moment when he was doing that, because it was probably pretty shitty for him. But down the road, after a few years of building the character, the humbling, the pain, and the humility, he kind of came out of it on top and very well respected, right? So that's the importance of playing the long game and sacrificing your ego now for the character later. And you don't really know that that's going to happen because there's no guarantee. It's like the faith in God that it might happen, and maybe it doesn't happen, but you don't want to live the other way anyway. You really don't. So yeah, just kind of tie that in, and we'll go for a break before I kind of talk about the relationship stuff. I do have a lot to say on this stuff. So anyway, let's have a 10-minute break, 15 maybe.
We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARDLIFE and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast.
Okay, I'm going to start here at the bottom of 80. But I'm not really going to go into it. So as we get into the top of 81, it's talking about like this guy who, who's kind of harmed his wife, and maybe he had an affair, and maybe this other woman understands, whatever. What are we going to do about a thing like that? The very bottom sentence on that first paragraph: a man is so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he is married to a loyal and courageous girl who has literally gone through hell for him. And, that's very common. Like, I've worked with a lot of guys who have stepped out of their relationship, and the woman has been very solid, and they feel that guilt and that shame, and they know they've done a lot of harm, but they're right involved in the affair or whatever. And there's a lot of pain there. And then as we kind of go to the next paragraph, whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? Undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all of the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. We feel we ought to say to her, we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that, we cannot do. We have no right to go further, though there may be some justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we have often found this the best course to take. So I'm going to give you my experience through dealing with stuff like that. You'll notice that Bill W. doesn't have much an opinion on sexual conduct in any of the literature. He leaves that alone for a good reason. So when you're sponsoring, and you will come across your sponsees that have, not been faithful and they've stepped out, whether it's a man or a woman, that's guaranteed going to happen in the work that you do. And this line here, it says, if we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. And that's true. I know that it kind of contradicts everything that I'm saying about the rigorous honesty part and going to any length to be honest. But I'm going to say this is the one area where I would make that exception as the sponsor. But if the sponsee really wants to tell her, then I'm not going to tell him not to. But what I will use this for is saying, no, we're not going to tell her about what you've done. And maybe it's not just cheating on her with a woman that he's right involved with. This could be hookers or rub and tugs or whatever the case. And maybe he's not right involved with these women, but he uses these services and it's not good for his relationship. And the woman that he's with is a good woman and he feels majorly shitty about it. So then we use that as a sponsor to say, you have to live the amend to your wife and your kids, and everything you do is to make your family life better, and you're going to go to extra high levels to make sure that this never happens again, and you're going to really treat these people with tons of respect, and you're never going to go there again. And so as a sponsor, that's emphasized, and we don't tell her. But what I've also seen is, first, I've seen guys do exactly what I've said. They've changed, and they dedicated their whole life to making reparation in the family and never doing that, and always just trying to build the family and build the unit. And then I've seen beautiful relationships take off from there, and, no harm, no foul, and nothing was ever said again. But then I've seen guys try to do that and then cheat again. On the second cheat, man, it's a no-go. It's like you're telling, right? Because it's in now and it's repeating, it's probably going to continue to repeat. It's kind of like they got the one chance. This is usually. And so on the second time or the third time, maybe they even withhold the second time from me or the sponsor. But eventually, if they're willing to keep like you as their sponsor, you'll find out if they're honest. And then they gotta go tell their wife. That's the advice that I give. Okay, and then so here, if she does know, so if the wife does know, undoubtedly we should admit our fault. Yeah, admit our fault. She may insist on knowing all the particulars, like every woman would want to know who she is, where she lives, all these kind of things. She will want to know who the woman is, where she is. We feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. And like saying that to your wife or girlfriend that knows that you've not been loyal to her, that can create a lot of havoc. Because they want to know, man, right? But you can't save your own skin by involving that other person. So the relationship may fail because you're going to keep that to yourself and you're not going to involve the other person. So there's so many risks in this part of things that, and like Bill W. says, though there may be justifiable exceptions, though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort. So there's no rule of any sort. So as the sponsor, you have to really rely on like pillars and God-centered intuition to really help guide, because your mind is going to go into like the world of the material and old beliefs and how things are and how people are. But you have to stay connected and use the advice that you get through downloads with God. And then if you're not getting them yourself, go talk to pillars. Find out as much as you can about the situation with your sponsee and what's happening, and then take it to pillars and get some advice, and then go pray, because they're not going to tell you exactly what to do. You're going to get 3 or 4 different ideas of what to do, and they might be similar. And then as you use your intuition, you'll know what to say. And the good thing about being a sponsor, when you're working with people like that, it's not you, right? So it's kind of like you give the best advice you can and you leave it to God and you kind of see what happens, and like all sorts of different things can happen. But through these experiences, you really gain a lot of knowledge as a sponsor, and you gain a lot of like dialed in intuition, because these ones aren't straight arrows. They're not cut and dry. You really got to rely on Creator and sharpen that intuition to give guidance of no real hard and fast lines. So just important stuff. Do you have anything on that? I'm sure you've dealt with that a lot, eh?
Yeah, I deal with it a lot. But no, I don't have much to add. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You have to seek good counsel. And that's with 12-step, God, loving people, and God, which are the next couple steps we're going to talk about, right? I mean, there's a lot of prayer and meditation that's involved in my life today that make decisions for not only me, but for my sponsees. And I talk to a lot of people when I'm trying, especially when I'm sponsoring people. I call my sponsor and my pillars more now, I think, than I did when I was messed up and needed help, because I can affect people's lives. And I take that very seriously. So it's important. It's really important.
Yeah, and it's also important to give all the data, give them maybe like strong advice, but try to help them come to their own decisions, right? Which isn't, in these areas, isn't that easy to do. So, a lot of God involved here. The bottom line, our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as it is for the husband. So back when the book was written, this whole book was written for the wife and the husband to both go through this separately with sponsors. So it's almost like, okay, if they really want to be together, if she really doesn't want to break up the family or leave this guy, like it should be given to her that she should go do a 12-step program of her own so she can clear all this stuff up and like go into this matter or this relationship more on a spiritual basis.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I believe that there is Codependence Anonymous, there's Al-Anon and Alateen and all sorts of programs that are very helpful that use this program to help. My wife wasn't into it. That's the truth for us. My wife went and she came home, and I think maybe she just had a bad meeting, but she came home and said, there's no way I'm going to go and sit around a table and listen to a bunch of women bitch about their husbands. And that was her first experience, unfortunately, and I wasn't in a position to change her mind. Like, again, not up to me to make that choice for her. So it probably took us a little longer to heal. But like I said earlier, she did start seeking therapy and help, and she had friends that she talked to. And I was talking to a friend at the halftime, and we did the step 10, 11 stuff, right? We talked. We were constantly on guard for our behaviors. And in the 11, we shared meditations with each other, and we discussed them, right? And we, not all the time, don't get me wrong, I didn't strong arm her into doing it, but every once in a while I'd be like, hey, I'm just about to sit down and do my meditation. You want to listen? And she would, and we'd talk about it. And over time we healed, but there are programs that will help. This Design for Living really can help. I wish she would have, I wish for her she would have found that. It would have been easier for her, if you know what I'm saying. But it didn't work out for her, and she went another route and ended up in a same or better place. So, that's what it is.
Okay, 82. It is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person whom she can vent jealousy. Perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. No outsider, the sponsor, or anyone else can appraise such an intimate situation. It may be that both will decide the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. And so at the top of the page it says, if we can forget, so can she. So it depends on the willingness of the people involved in this relationship and how bad they want to hold on to it. Let bygones be bygones. Sounds simple, not so simple. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. So the guy or the girl who stepped out, that is kind of the premise of what I was talking about. The other's happiness is utmost in mind. You make the family and your wife and your kids number one, and like that is top priority rating in your life and in your recovery, and like rebuilding this relationship. But also the rebuild, and I'll talk about this on the other page, means that you keep working your steps so that you're under construction yourself, because as long as you keep working and doing the deal, you'll probably be able to help rebuild this through God rebuilding you. But if you don't keep up on your own action in your own program and you try to self-will and pry and manipulate the relationship to be better, it'll probably be destroyed. Mm-hmm. So keep it always in sight that we are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. And as sponsors, you should probably circle or underline that line, because it is the most destructive human emotion. And not only like in these types of situations, but when you're dealing with like men or women just as you're sponsoring, and you go through like their process or you hear about their story in their sex conduct, you're going to see jealousy is like rooted in so many people. And there's a lot of fear behind it. There's a lot of work that needs to be revealed through the jealousy defect. And it can like ruin everything. It can ruin like your life, because you can never go into a relationship without jealousy. So jealousy is like, something that as a sponsor, you have to look behind the jealousy and find the fears and work on the fears and give good guidance as a sponsor, because jealousy it's a really destructive human emotion. It destroys the person who's jealous, and it destroys all their relationships, and they'll end up being alone, right? So it's a good experience as a sponsor to gain understanding on how the alcoholic mind works and dealing with fear, because it all stems from fear anyway. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk face-to-face combat. Does anyone know what that means? Lee does? Tell us what it means, Lee. Use the mic. Right?
It means there's more than one way to heal other than head on.
Yeah.
You can do all encompassing all around with absolutely so many different angles. So in regards to like my amends to my wife, I was in a rush here, okay, I want to make all these amends. And Jesse pointed out this line, he said, there's so many other ways you can make amends because there were so many other behaviors that caused harm.
Boom.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to give a little bit of a different angle, but he's 100% right. There's other ways to like do some of these amends, but what I think this is exactly saying is good generalship may decide the problem be attacked on the flank rather than face-to-face combat, meaning you and the wife aren't going at it. You and your partner don't just deal with this. It's like on the flank. You deal with this with your sponsor or your therapist, and you deal with this with your sponsor or your therapist, and you deal with your own shit on the flank so that you can come together and the utmost frankness is demanded. So as you come together, you can be calm, civil, and prudent about the communication that you're going to have, because power-driven arguments cause a lot of problems. So if you can attack it on the flank, which means you use somebody else to help you deal with your stuff, get some guidance and some maybe coaching on how to approach the situation, then you guys can come together and talk about it. It doesn't go very well, you go back to your corners, you deal with your people in your corner, and then you come back again and you work on it like that. And then I think what Lee is saying is like, as you are both trying to, maybe some of that applies. Yeah? Okay. Yeah, and then, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we did that with you two, right? Although it wasn't in the exact same situation, but I did a lot of that with Amber Lee, and Lee did a lot of it with Jesse. Although I did some of it with both of them at the same fucking time. It'd be like Amber Lee calling me on one phone, and then it would be Lee on the double line and be like, I gotta let you go. And I talked to, it was fucking interesting. But so that situation can also happen, because as you sponsor somebody, you might get to know their partner too, and they might really like take to you too, and they know you're really close to their partner, so you might get calls from the wife and the husband, especially if it's in recovery, but even if it's not in recovery. And so for me, and you guys should like really listen to this because this is important, you do not want to take sides. You never take sides. You give them good guidance based out of the book, based out of spiritual principles, and you have to let them come to their own decisions, right? You can show them all the data. You can show them where they're selfish, they're dishonest, they're, and you can say, you know, normally in a situation like this is the advice I'm going to give you, but I'm not God and I don't really know what's best for you. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to like make these decisions yourself. And so I did a good job. See, I'm still friends with both of them, right? Yeah. Because I learned. He never would say anything. He'd just be about me. When I phoned him, he'd be on my part. Yeah, like either one who phoned me, it was about them and their life and their best well-being. And And then it was Lee, and it was about his life and his best well-being, what's best for each individual. And that's where I left it, right? So I didn't like say anything about the other one, really. It was just like, that was hard to do, though. It takes practice, man. It does.
Well, and keep in mind that both of you are in recovery. Both of you have this program to work and these principles to put into play. You take that one out of that, it changes a bit. It changes a bit. I have to fight it on the flank, and this is what I was talking about by exactly what he said, working on myself, right? I couldn't work on my wife. Trust me, I just screwed up our lives. There was no room for me to try and tell her what she needed to work on, period. It wasn't happening. So the only thing that I could do, was work on me. I went, I thought I was a big smart guy and read 2 Wives to her, told her why she wasn't, all that accepting of me and she should be much nicer and more accommodating and, and this and that. And she did not like that very much. No surprise. And a year later, I reread 2 Wives, and I went to my wife and I made another amends because I had recognized that chapter was entirely about what she had to deal with and how she had to protect our children and how she had to do this and deal with me there and do that. That's what that chapter was about. It was around that time that I started understanding that my behaviors had caused the jealousy or the suspicion, arouse suspicion and jealousy it talks about in our book, right? I was always a friendly guy. In my mind, I thought I was just a friendly guy. But really, it's flirting. It's flirting, and it's not okay. So I started changing those behaviors. And whatever happened for her started happening because we got better together eventually, right? But the only way I could do it was on the flank for me because my wife wasn't in recovery. Probably some pluses and some difficulties on both sides. It's probably tough both being in recovery. That probably adds a layer of difficulty. Yeah.
If you have a partner that's in recovery, don't tell them to go call their sponsor.
Don't tell your partner in recovery to go call her sponsor. I'll tell you something. You guys now know my wife's not in recovery.
Look at Dion's pointing at Crystal.
Yeah, Crystal's laughing her ass off. Because she knows. She's done it. My wife's not in recovery, and she looks at me and says, "You should probably go to a meeting, eh?" And it makes me mad. I can't stand hearing that. Probably because she's right, though. No, she's probably right.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Gord, did you read this paragraph?
No.
Okay.
No, we stopped at the bottom of 82.
Okay, I'm not going to touch on that. Gord touched on the bottom paragraph where it's like, them coming out of the cellar. Fuck, nothing wrong here because the guy stopped drinking. So everything should be fine because we stopped drinking. And that's not the case. So the next paragraph on 83.
The one thing I didn't mention that I wanted to was the selfish at the bottom of 82. And it says the selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. A little bit about what I was just talking about with I'm a nice guy, I'm flirting, but also I'm out, on sales calls and I'm out drinking with the guys, but it's their clients, honey. I'm building a business for us. I'm making us money. It was just all about me all the time. And that causes pain. That shit causes pain. And I don't realize it until I've been leveled in it myself. So I just want to point that out. Selfish, inconsiderate habits. This is why we look at our defects. This is why we go to great lengths of doing a thorough step 4, is to start realizing these manifestations, common manifestations, or if you will, simple patterns in our life, right? Simple patterns in my behavior. I was a very selfish and inconsiderate person. And the closest person to me suffered a lot of that shit.
Okay, and thanks for bringing that up. I just want to touch on that too. Home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he thinks sobriety is enough. Gord did say it already, but I'm going to reiterate it. It's not enough. You know, we think a man is unthinking when he thinks sobriety is enough. It's not enough. Emotional sobriety is like what we're talking about. And how do we do that? Next page. Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. Most people think what that line means is you go fix your relationships because this chapter is about amends. Maybe that's what Bill W. meant, but my interpretation of that line is no, the long period of reconstruction ahead is you.
Yeah.
God, build with me, do with me as thou wilt. You're under reconstruction. Through the reconstruction and you changing and living on spiritual basis of life, the relationships in your life will fall into place. And if they don't, then they're not meant to be, because some people have serious resentments that they're not giving up. They're not given this gift of a design for living like we are. But you'll learn how to handle that also as you are on your long period of reconstruction ahead. So that's, to me, what that line means. And we must take the lead. So again, you take the lead on your own journey of reconstruction ahead, building your relationship with God, building your relationship with people, doing the things that we do, and then things will fall into place. But it might not fall into place the way that you think they're going to fall into place, or in the time frame that you want them to fall into place. It's all in God's timing. And when you think about the principle behind step 9, it's justice, okay? And most people, when they think of the principle justice, they think of the modern world of the material term of justice, like the law, justice. That's not what the fuck it means at all. Because God's justice is different than man's justice. God's justice is like making things right. Whole. And the justice for the people you've harmed, and also justice for yourself with like self-love. So justice has like a way different meaning when it comes to the spiritual principle of justice versus man version of what justice is. So when you hear that principle in the program or a program, remember to give it a different definition that's way more broad and way more like loving and like balanced than. Go ahead, Chico.
Yeah, that's why amends sounds a lot better than restitution, right? Restitution's got a harsh ring to it.
Yeah.
He said that's why amends is much better than the word restitution, because amends has a much better meaning and ring to it.
Yeah, and the word amend comes from amendment, which means to change.
To correct the behavior.
Correct the behavior. You knock a man's fence down, you don't give him money and say, here's the money for the fence. No, you rebuild his fence, right? You change your actions and do what needs to be done to make things right.
Funny story, my sponsor told me he knew when I had finally started getting this thing. And I don't know if you guys remember Scarborough, but we used to have a bunch of meetings over there, and they have those posts and then the cable that goes there. And one day I busted that cable with my truck, right? It backed into it and tore it apart. And he come across me at one meeting, and I was there. I'd gone and bought parts, and I was repairing that cable. And so now he bugs me to this day. He's like, that's when I knew that you were going to get this thing, because you were actually fixing the fence. But that's the reality, right? That is, it's action. It's not words. It's action.
Okay. We ought to sit down with, a remorseful mumbling that we are sorry will not fit the bill.
Nope.
So in your amends, as you're doing amends, this is not about I'm sorry. Although when you do the verbal direct amends, a well-placed sorry is very powerful. But remember that sorry only holds the weight of the action that comes after in the amend, in the change. Okay? And you may have to do another amend later, depending on who it is and what the harm was, because the first amend at a certain point has a certain amount of weight, but through the action and the change, another amend with I'm truly sorry, those words kind of thing, 2 or 3 years down the road, has a lot more weight. Okay. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances that our own actions are partly responsible. So we clean the house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator, here's directions, show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And like, I got to emphasize again, as you go through this chapter, go through it by yourself and use a special marker and underline exact directions, because the directions are important in this program. It's not theoretical. These are like clear-cut directions. And it says here, you know, sitting with the family and asking each morning. And maybe it's not like with them, but you ask each morning, Creator, show me the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. We live our way into good thinking and change thinking. We don't think our way into a different life. That doesn't work. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we think we ought to not urge them. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. And my daughter's back there, and when I was doing my amends, like I talked about program and God and all the stuff all the time because it had changed me, but they wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't give a fuck. They didn't want to hear me talking about God while I'm getting better and they're getting worse or whatever. And like, I'm a different person because I didn't like God and now I love God. And like they're like, who the fuck are you? Right? Like, seriously, man. And I did a lot of damage doing that. And then I finally gave my head a shake after like a year of doing that. And I said, 3 years doing that? 3 minimum. Anyway, but there was a point that came where I realized I can't do that. And then I made another mistake. I realized I had to quit doing that. And I read this book. I don't know which book it was, but it really taught me that they're not my kids. That I have to live this and shut the fuck up about program and about God and just live this and be better and show up. And then so I started doing that. But then, you know, my ex-wife called blah, blah, blah one day and we were fighting because she was mad at me too after a few years, still quite a few years. And then I'm like, Shannon, they're not my kids. They're God's kids. She's like, have you lost your fucking mind? Like it seemed like I was crazy, right? I'd gone like evangelical or whatever. And I'm like, they're not my kids, there's God's kids. And she seriously thought I lost my fucking mind, right? And then I remember talking to Jill and Lucy, and they were at my little apartment, and I'm like, fuck, you guys aren't my kids. And they're like, have you lost your fucking mind, Dad? They were so upset with me, and I was just like, what? I have this like spiritual awakening that they're Creator's kids, and yeah, okay, great, but don't tell them that, right? I learned, don't tell them that, but I did.
Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil.
But later, once I shut up and I just lived it, and you know, it kind of all came around and it got a lot better.
Did.
Anyway, and like here it says, they will change in time. And like Lucy's here and she talks to Creator daily. My other daughter loves Creator. My ex-wife Shannon is leaning in heavily into Creator. Like through the action as I take the lead and shut up and just do it, it worked way better than trying to like push it on them. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. That's why I love the book, because my life is in here. I've made all these mistakes and then, Jesus. Must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness or being an asshole or being angry would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs you can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Certain things are never going to be straightened out the way you want, but if you can honestly say that you would straighten them out, then that's what really matters. Yeah. And sometimes with like old girlfriends or whatever, where guys have a lot of guilt and shame for the way they treated, but they're not going to make those amends because they really harmed them bad, and they're on a new path in life, and this was years and years ago. I've allowed my guys to write like forgiveness letters where they're really making the amend through pen to paper because they need to get it out, and then they go burn it or they say a prayer or whatever. But it's really, really helpful for the person who carries that to get it out and really give it to Creator. And through pen to paper, there's no better way. If we could, some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, depending if the sponsor says don't do it on your own. And there may be valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. Take that line and put it into your life now. Yes, it applies for the amends, but this also applies for now. Okay? You be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble. And you might not be able to be those things, which is why a sponsor is so important to help you so that these spiritual principles that we're reading can come to life without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. So if we don't stand on our feet and we continue to be servile, scraping, living in self-pity or people-pleasing or whatever, we actually harm ourselves quite a bit. And if we allow that with our sponsees, like maybe female sponsees who are submissive, and I don't mean in that way, but in like just being a submissive person that doesn't want to, like timid, yeah, that's a good word, like trying to help them get stronger. Because if they stay timid and they don't speak up, it really doesn't help them a lot in like spiritual growth. It kind of stunts their growth. Really helping them step out of those like deep defects is really important. And then I'm going to stop there and let Gord talk on anything, and then he can read the last bit of this chapter.
All right, well, you pretty much explained everything. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the principle behind it. And I want to talk about what we were saying about putting this into our life. Long period of reconstruction ahead. Remorseful mumblings of sorry won't fit the bill. It's not going to work, basically, is what they're saying. An apology is not just going to work. Defects may be glaring, but the chances are that our own actions are partly, or in my case, largely responsible most of the time. We clean house with our family, asking each morning in meditation for God, Creator, to show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. So we take this, and we've done this, we've done all the amends, okay? And now we're out living our lives. But this great, step 12 is about having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, right? We carry the message to alcoholics, and we practice these principles in all our affairs. So in these principles, steps 8 and 9 that we discussed together, we have brotherly love and we have justice. When I start taking these into my life, it's amazing what I was able to learn from doing solid amends work, from listening to people, from doing things on the flank and working on my selfish and inconsiderate habits. I learned about humility. I learned about not having to be servile or scraping. That doesn't mean don't beg. It just means have some self-worth. You learn to have self-worth. You learn to care. I don't have to take people's shit to be a nice guy, okay? But I do have to treat them with kindliness and tolerance. And when I start to learn these lessons, I start to become a different person. And that is why I talk about step 9 so much with my sponsees. That is why I take step 9 very, very seriously. And I'm going to give you one example, and then I'm going to shut up, and we're going to talk about the promises because they're beautiful. You guys know I've repaired my life with my kids, my wife. What you don't know is when I took this job that I have now, they had hired me because they were in desperate need of someone to come in and help, because their entire management team all of their project managers, the general manager, they fired them all because they were misappropriating funds. They had 40 some odd files that were open, and like there were jobs that were started but never finished and just halted, like just on hold, people waiting for stuff. There was money. We were paid to build an entire house, and no one ever did anything. We had the money already, and no one ever did anything, right? And I had to, when I took this job, because remember, nobody else would hire me. I spent 3 years plugging away, trying to will myself into success. Finally realized that I needed to give it to God. And then, you know, I was reminded it took a couple months, but I finally got this job. And so I went in there at a much lower rate of pay that I was willing or ready to have. I was willing to take it, but I was told you're not getting jobs because maybe you're giving them too high of expectations. Why don't you go in there with no expectations and see what happens? So that's what I did, and I got a much lower salary, and it kind of sucked, but whatever, I got a job, so I was happy about that, right? But then I realized what a friggin' mess it was. I spent the next month auditing all of those files and giving the ownership in Ontario the real deets. I gave them the complete breakdown on every single one of their files, good or bad. And they were hemorrhaging money. Okay, they were in the red. They were literally going to shut the business down. And they said, Gord, we'll give you one shot. You got to go market this thing. And I said, no. They said, what? What are you talking about? Because I'd started learning about justice. I started learning about brotherly love, and I started recognizing that we had amends to make in business. I was able to take these things into my business life as well. And I looked at them and I said, we've got to make all of these people whole. And they thought about it, and they ended up agreeing with me. And that's exactly what we did. I spent the next year and a half, 2 years for some of them, making all those files whole. I told them at the beginning, we will lose some clients, but we've got to do this. If you got any leg to stand on here in Alberta, this is the only way forward, because I'd learned that from this. And guess what? I only lost one client. Everyone else started supporting us again, and we started building a business. And guess what? 5 years later, got that client back. Crazy stuff, man. I was able to put this reconstruction, this long road of reconstruction, into my life, into my business, into my family, into all things that I do. And it benefits everybody around me. This is a real gift. And the promises that we're about to talk about are the proof. That's it. That's all I wanted to share, really. It's a big deal. Making amends and learning how to make amends and learning about caring enough to see justice through. Learning enough to have brotherly love for your fellow human beings. That has benefited my life more than anything in this program.
And like, just to add to that, like when I quit my career at like 3 years sober or whatever, and then I just wanted to go help alcoholics and addicts, and I didn't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I just prayed and I meditated, and I just kept fucking sponsoring and serving and trying to be like reconstructing myself, and like talked about some of the mistakes I've made with my family and the things, but I always tried to claim spiritual progress out of it rather than perfection. So I learned like hard lessons along the way, but I stayed the course. And eventually, my business was built through God guidance. And like today, it's built based exactly what just Gord said, on spiritual principles, through service, through group conscious decisions, through all these things. And like, I wake up every day and it's still there, and I don't worry. And I know that if I lose a client or a customer, it's the way it's meant to be. And I have lost 2 contracts since I started, but both of them in the best way. I could call either one of the directors today and say, hey, how's it going? And it wasn't due to anything that we did wrong. It was due to a year and a half of a contract and they eventually end, right? For whatever the reasons are. And like that's your best bet in life, is to always try to go that way, and things will work out. It's part of the universe's like plan. If you believe in the universe and you believe in the lessons, and these things just happen. But it takes time, and part of that time is the healing, because you don't get the next stepping stone or the next opening until you've healed whatever needed to be healed. So you're kind of healing as things open up. But then you get tempted along the way by a big chunk of money or this beautiful woman that doesn't fit your life, but you're going to take her anyway because that's what your ego wants. Like, and then you will stop it. And then you kind of need to learn your lesson probably the hard way.
Yeah. For example, I was going through, like in the last few months, I've been going through some serious stress and anger issues because I got this one guy at a certain customer's business that's causing me grief, and he's in direct response. He's directly responsible for how much money we can make, right? And I'm fighting it, and I'm getting angry, and I'm going through it, and and I look at it, I'm like, Jesus, this is $2 million worth of work a year. Like I can't say no to that, right? But at the end of the day, you know what? I can say no to that. I don't need that shit in my life. I don't need to be scraping or servile to anyone, because you know what? God's going to see fit to make me successful in any way he sees fit or not. Like, it's up to God. It's up to God. What I do know is that I don't need people like that in my life, causing me anguish all the time. It's pretty obvious. When it causes me that much pain, it's got to go. It's got to go. And so, for now, I've been able to just give that account to my other project managers and say, here, you guys deal with this guy, because I can't, my ownership's well aware of it, and it's not all that profitable work anyway. So when you start thinking about the anguish that it's causing, and the stress and the shit that it's causing in your business compared to the profit that's there, sometimes it's a better answer to just X that $2 million if it's not that profitable and it causes you too much stress. Free you up to find something different. I don't have to be scraping. These are lessons that are learned, and I'm always up against something. Whenever I can focus on God and recognize the lesson, I can start to grow. Took me a while to recognize that one, I talked to you a few times about that. I didn't realize. Starting to try my will again, right? We're human. We do that. But I have good people in my life now that help me along the way.
Smack them around.
Yeah, fuck you wish. All right. Are we doing it?
Yep, give her.
These are the step 9 promises, everyone. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, what phase? Step 9. We will be amazed before we are halfway through. Halfway through what?
Step 9.
Our amends list, exactly. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. Can you imagine? Peace. What the hell is that? I do now. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? I love that everyone just said, we think not. That's great. Did you say it on Zoom too? Did you guys say it to yourself? Yeah. It's trained in our brain. We hear it at the meetings and stuff, right? They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they will always materialize if we work for them. Work, 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 work. Now, I don't have a ton to say. Like, I could walk you through and tell you why these are step 9 promises. It's pretty straightforward. We'll know a new freedom and a new happiness. Why? Well, because I've set right my wrongs. My soul starts to feel free because I am not riddled with shame and guilt any longer. I'll not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. That took a long time for me. There are still things I think about, how I behaved in front of one of my kids or something that gives me kind of a shudder. But I keep giving it to God. It will get better over time, I bet you. It goes away. Because a lot of it has already. Why? Because I've corrected my past. I don't feel guilt and shame as much as I used to. And I continue to do that every day and have for several years now. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. I had no idea what serenity, I knew what the meaning was. I know what serenity means, but I just never felt it. I always had anguish. I always had that hole that needed filling. I always felt out of place in a room. Can any of you relate to that? Can any of you relate to not feeling that anymore? I sure can. And I knew peace. When I lay my head down on the pillow at night, I have cleared up the wreckage of my past. It doesn't haunt me anymore. I can go to sleep. Most of the time. Occasionally I will make mistakes, but that's the next step we're going to talk about. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, no matter how bad I was, whether I was a Maine and Hastings junkie or I was an alcoholic at home sitting in my sofa chair, no matter how bad it was for any of us, I will eventually see how that experience can help another. I have a very special gift that I can give to certain people that like my message, can relate to my story, and those are the people I sponsor. It's a gift from God, I think. That's how I view it anyway. And the more I help people, the more I just step up and be of service to people is more like it. I don't like the thought of me helping people, but the more I step up and be of service to people, the more I realize that, yeah, this is a gift. Feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. Why? Oh, because I'm working on being a better human being. I quit feeling sorry for myself all the time. We lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. This whole program starts to teach me about character. This is the building of character. Step 9 in cleaning up the past and recognizing, listening to people tell me how they feel and how they saw it. Teaches me who I was, and it helps me to work on the defects that I didn't really know about. And when I do that, it starts to go away. Self-seeking will slip away. That's obvious. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. It does. I want to be helpful today. I can be helpful today. I get to show up in people's lives today. That was never once in my entire life my attitude. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. Why do you think that is? Because we start paying our debts. We don't dodge our creditors anymore. We make deals and we do bankruptcy. We do whatever it takes to clean up the past. So we quit fearing it. We start having conversations, making direct amends. And most of the time, like it says, 9 out of 10 times, people are pretty cool about it. So I quit fearing people. I start trusting God. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. That's an interesting one. I think that will continue for my lifetime. I think that is more of I think that's more a step 10 and 11 reaction, the more that I do it, because it does say, we commence right away with the rest of the work. So I think in congruence with the amends, and the character building work that we're doing, that starts to come true. It just has to start coming true. We start to realize that God's doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. I don't know where it was along the line in my recovery, but somewhere along the line, not only did I just automatically change my way of thinking to seek to do God's will, but I also recognized that He was there. That I believe that God has done this for me. It's usually when I look backwards in my life. But I believe that today. And I'm not sure when that happened, but somewhere along the lines it did. These aren't extravagant promises. They happen sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They're being fulfilled among us. But I'll tell you something else I believe. Sometimes they come and go, depending on how close to God I'm staying, depending on how eager I am to grow spiritually, and how dedicated I am to being of service. When I start to falter, which I do, I'd be a liar if I didn't tell you that happens from time to time. I don't always want to show up. I get tired. I just want to spend some time with my wife. Why do I have to take this phone call? I'm right in the middle of a dinner with my mom and dad. But I keep letting those things get in the way. I can get sick pretty quick, no matter how healthy I am. So I believe that some of these promises, they come and go depending on how much work I'm constantly doing. Because remember, we cannot rest on the accomplishments of our past or our laurels, as it says in the book. This is a daily thing. I've got to keep it up. I promise you. And I don't make many promises, hey, JR? But I do promise that these will materialize for you if you continue to work at it. And that's what it says in this book. Bill?
I've always thought they were pretty extravagant promises. I really have. I'm like, those are fucking pretty deadly. Why do they say they're not really extravagant? I've always wondered that. And like when people like in that part of the meeting where they read them, I always say in my head or sometimes out loud, yeah, they are. And then I just looked it up, extravagant. Lacking in moderation, balance, and restraint, exceeding the limits of reason or necessity. So I think what that's saying is this is the way we should live. That's the reasonable way that a human should live. And these things aren't extravagant if we live the right way. Living the wrong way, which my mind was thinking about it, that's like where they're extravagant, right? But now I understand why it says we think not, even though I don't think much people really realize what extravagant means. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Just a couple things. I won't take much time. Gord covered it pretty good. But we will know a new freedom and a new happiness. Think about that. It's not the same as what you thought freedom was or happiness. You're like living in a new state of mind, new freedom. The definition of freedom was one thing, and what you thought, oh, Canada's a free country, I can do whatever I want. No, this is fucking spiritual liberation from this world of the material where we fucking live different, man. Like, and I'm free from the bondage of self. Because I've been tied to the bondage of self my whole life. Like, that's kind of what it's saying, I believe. And a new happiness. And, you know, I think happiness really isn't maybe the right word. It's like joy. The definition of joy is good mood of the soul. Like feeling that like joy, that good mood of the soul where it's just like, fuck, man, life's good. I feel good about who I am. Knowing serenity and peace, that's like God dope stuff, right? That's like, you can't even explain this stuff to people. Like Robin, you're a year in, and like probably know some of your old people that you knew, and like, they're like, well, what has it done? And you can't explain it. It's like, yeah, go ahead. Pardon? Contempt? Content, yeah. Yeah, dude. Like everything's in its place. Like everything's okay. And like that's kind of what we get out of this. Nothing's really out of place anymore. Part of like our restless irritable discontent was like, we always needed to be somewhere else, or something wasn't right, and I always needed to be over there because over here sucks, or I need that job because I don't make enough money here, or oh, that chick's hotter and I'm gonna leave my girl. Like nothing was ever right. So being content and be able to sit on the couch and actually watch the show or whatever is like, that's a priceless gift, right? Going to bed and your brain is like shut off. That's fucking different.
Yeah.
Right? Again, touch base, Gord, benefit how our experience can benefit others. That's kind of one of the things we want to do. And I guess what I'll just say about this whole paragraph is like, this is the barometer to see where you're at in your recovery.
Yeah.
This will tell you, well, those things aren't in my life. Well, then they should be. Economic insecurity will leave us. Might take a little bit different than Gord's. I realize that that's not what's important in life. It's not that important, so I don't care about it near as much as I did. And I know that God will provide whatever he needs to provide. And if that's very little, like I had most of my recovery, I guess I was pretty cool with it. So I had no economic insecurity. And now that I'm making some money, I don't really have economic insecurity. I lose 2 contracts. Fucking okay, I guess God doesn't want me to work there or whatever. And then another one comes along and another one comes along. And it's just kind of like, fuck, you just build this trust that everything's going to be okay. And even if I lost them all and I had to like shrink my company down back to just by myself, then I guess that's what God needed and wanted. So it's not really going to fuck me up too bad. But what'll fuck me up too bad is if my ego starts going, oh, you need this. Oh, you need this payment. Oh, you need that car. And then I get like 15 grand a month in payments again. And then it all changes. And then my ego and will made decisions based on self that is later going to place me in a position to be hurt. Now I'm humbled for some more lessons. And maybe it's 10 years and I crawl out of it later. But again, I'll learn the lessons maybe the hard way. But I'm trying really hard to not learn the lessons the hard way. So these are like barometers. And finally, I'll just, we will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. That intuitively is like for real. If you clear the channel with your step 10, and we'll get into that tomorrow, but you get this way of like being guided and directed through the intuition and God, what used to be a hunch, occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of your mind. The thing about that is it goes against the way that you used to make decisions, so the brain tries to fuck it up. But once you sharpen it, like I say, sharpen intuition, you sharpen your intuition by listening to it, and you get better at it. You build it through recovery. It comes. And like for you guys here, it might be different than a lot of people in recovery because they're not here listening to this kind of shit. And they're just still doing what they've always done. And maybe they're not drinking, and maybe they're half-ass happy too, but they're still running their own lives. And the rooms are full of people struggling. But it doesn't really have to be like that, man. Like, and if you see certain people and they're not like, yeah, death happens and things happen and it's hard. But I mean like struggling with fighting everyone and everything and always there's always something new they're fighting with and blah, blah, blah. And they're 15 years sober or 10 years sober or 6 years sober. And you're like, fuck, do I really want that at like 10 years sober or 6 years sober or 20 years sober? But then you see somebody else with like 5 years sober or whatever, and they're fucking doing this thing and they're like pretty content. Or you see people, right? And my advice is go ask them what they do. If you see something you want in people, go ask them what they do in their recovery. You'll find out they're doing the same things that we're talking about here. They're seeking that humility. They're helping others. They do regular inventory. They probably got sponsors, and they're doing this thing at a different level. They understand step 10. That's one thing I'll finish off later, I guess tonight, but tomorrow or next week also. You ask people what step 10 is, and you'll find out a lot about what they know about recovery, I guess, in a sense, because step 10 kind of tells and reveals a lot. And anyway, that's pretty judgmental, but
Well, now I'm nervous.
that's it. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to pass that thing around.